Okay, thank you for being with us here tonight. My name is Nick Brannon. I'm with Socialist Action, and I'm happy to welcome you to the first in our Monday night webinar series. We are bringing you these Monday night webinars every Monday. We have 5 scheduled so far. Starting Mondays at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Tonight, our webinar is Perspectives on the 2020 Presidential Election. We have with us here tonight Howie Hawkins from the Green Party, who is a candidate in the Green Party primary for the Green Party presidential nomination. We have Michael Albert, who is with Z Magazine and is an advocate of the Safe States voting strategy. And we have Jeff Mackler from Socialist Action, who is Socialist Action's 2020 presidential candidate. The 3 speakers will each start with 5 to 7 minutes talking to make their opening remarks, and then we will continue with discussion among each of our speakers here tonight. So I believe, Jeff, you're starting us off, right?
Yes. Well, first, glad to be with you, and special thanks to Michael Albert and Howie Hawkins. We're proud to have you in this discussion, exchange of ideas, which comes at an unprecedented time, if I may not exaggerate, in US history. Here we have behind us a few minutes ago, the President of the United States invoking an 1807 law, proposing to send out the military to quell massive protests in 40+ cities across the United States, where unprecedented numbers are coming out to condemn the racist murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. They're multiracial crowds, they're overwhelmingly peaceful, and they have been met more often than not, especially in the evening hours, with brute force by the police, by the National Guard. So here we are, and we're discussing and debating the presidential elections, which also come at a time when a monstrous pandemic is plaguing the United States, taking 100,000 lives, and yet people are in the streets protesting against racism and so many of the other inequities in society. What I'm saying is that if the protesters were to be judged in context, they are outraged at a system of racist police violence that has permeated this country back to the days of slavery, not just under the present administration of Donald Trump, but under the previous administrations of Obama. In fact, of all the previous administrations. What it says to me is that it's not the candidate that is flawed, whether it be Joseph Biden or Donald Trump, but the whole system of capitalist corruption, racism, poverty, and unemployment. Indeed, the pandemic has revealed, contrary to the idea that times were great, unemployment rate was the lowest in history, jobs were secure, stock market was going up, and the economy was stable, the veil of stability has been ripped off the system to expose inequalities that go deep into society. The real unemployment rate, the government calls it the labor participation rate, is almost 50% with no jobs. This has been the case with the Obama administration and Trump and the Democrats and Republicans. I'm running for president of the United States because the present times, more than any time in my life, have exposed a system whose base fundamentals are corrupt, whose never-ending wars in 7 countries simultaneously conducted by the Obama administration, whose unprecedented $1 trillion war spending, and whose racist policies have relegated the poorest of the poor, Blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans, to third-class living. All of this is coming to fore today, being exposed as never before. In my view, there is absolutely no hope that capitalism can be reformed with the election of the Democrats or any other party that is not based on a massive working class fight back. What we've seen today and yesterday and the past 6 days and longer is that when millions go into the street, what was yesterday considered impossible is today the reality. I was talking to Mike and Howie before the show started, and we were commenting on the media coverage. Here you have CNN featuring in a favorable way, decrying the racism that's inherent in the system, demonstrators everywhere, and largely placing the blame for the violence on the police, who are the instigators of it. In my opinion, there is no choice between the Democrats and Republicans. There is no such thing as a lesser evil. And the only future we have ahead of us is, as we see in the streets, the massive mobilization of working people, in this case, and young people who break with the twin parties of capitalism, who build their own working class movement based on reinvigorated fighting unions, build a labor party that they can control and challenge the system at the point of production and in the political arena. The times are propitious for changes that none of us ever expected yesterday, and the future, as terrible as it is with regard to the pandemic, holds forth the possibility of massive change as the American people awaken from their relative quiescence and take to the streets. That finishes my remark. I believe Howie's next.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Socialist Action, for organizing this forum. And like Jeff, we're in a unique situation. It's pretty much everybody in the country can see that the two governing parties are presiding now over a failed state. The coronavirus crisis illustrates that. US has 4% of the world's population and 30% of the infections and the deaths. Trump is incompetent and frankly indifferent. And Biden is invisible. He could have the stage and point the direction with some real demands on what we need. But the best he does is a little, sentimental statements about how we need somebody beside Trump, but that's not a program. And now with all these police killings have been revealed to us in the last month, some of them took place a couple months ago, it's clear to everybody who's paying attention that Black America, or the state, has failed Black America for a long time. And so people are out in the streets now demanding justice. And Trump is fanning the flames with his law and order rants and his racist dog whistles. And Biden is still invisible. So I think, like Jeff said, I think he's right. This is an opportunity for the left to step up, fill the political vacuum, and point the way and give some focus to this anger and anxiety by putting forward demands. People out there just demanding or chanting, no justice, no peace, Black Lives Matter, fine sentiments, but what are we demanding? Of course, we want those other 3 officers arrested. How about community control of the police? How about a Johnny Gamage law, which we've been advocating here for 25 years? He's a Syracuse young man, Black man, that was suffocated to death in the suburbs of Pittsburgh, visiting his cousin Ray Seals, who was a football player with the Pittsburgh Steelers back in 1995. And that law would say anytime the civil rights of somebody is allegedly violated by local law enforcement, including bodily injury and death, you automatically get a federal investigation and, if warranted, prosecution, because local DAs are too close to law enforcement, and even state attorney generals too often are. When it comes to the coronavirus, why isn't Biden out there saying test, trace, and isolate, damn it? I mean, the whole Pacific Rim has done that, and they've suppressed the virus from New Zealand and South Korea. And here we are, we're going back out to go die for the Dow, because that's all Trump cares about. And the Democratic governors are playing along, and we don't have the program to protect us when we go out. We need job, income, housing, healthcare, and workplace safety standards and protections to get through this immediate crisis. And then in the longer run, we're facing a situation where consumer demand is down. People don't have money. If they got it, they're holding it for essentials. Investors aren't going to invest because it's too risky. And both parties have a dogmatic commitment to private enterprise alone to get us out of this depression. So what I've been calling for in my campaign is an eco-socialist Green New Deal. And that was to stop the climate meltdown, but now it's for economic recovery. You can go on my website, howiehawkins.us. We got a whole budget. 27.5 trillion over 10 years creates 38 million jobs, rebuilding all our productive sectors for 100% clean energy and zero to negative carbon emissions. That's what the climate science carbon budgets say we need to do. That's the kind of public investment with public ownership and planning we need in energy, transportation, and manufacturing to get us out of this depression we've dived into. Part of that Green New Deal is an economic Bill of Rights, because inequality kills. Working class life expectancies have been declining in recent years. So this is a job guarantee, a guaranteed income above poverty, affordable housing, comprehensive health care, lifelong tuition-free public education, and a secure retirement. And then finally, if you've been paying attention, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists has moved their doomsday clock the closest it's ever been to midnight, because we're in a new nuclear arms race. And so what my campaign's saying is we need to take tension-reducing initiatives, demilitarization, cut the military budget 75%, bring the troops home from these 7 official shooting wars, and the special ops we do in over 100 countries and 800 foreign military bases, pledge no first use of nuclear weapons, disarm to a minimum credible deterrent, and then go to the other nuclear powers and say we want complete and mutual nuclear disarmament under the terms of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which 122 nations agreed to the text of 3 years ago. And the International Campaign for the Abolition of Nuclear Weapons got the Nobel Peace Prize for that. But nobody in this country hardly knows that. None of the presidential candidates in these primaries have talked about it. So one thing the left needs to do is put that on the table and get it talked about. So what my campaign is trying to do, we're trying to get on all 51 ballots, 50 states and DC, and go all out in every state. We're probably the only campaign that's going to get matching funds, so we'll have $700,000 to help us do a campaign. And what we're really trying to do is just support and give voice to these social movements that are demanding justice, demanding climate action, and demanding peace. So that's my statement.
Should I just go? There? Well, I had expected that we would be debating, and I'm not sure how to inject a little disagreement. The topic is supposed to be election strategy. And from what I'm hearing, and please correct me if I get this wrong later, the election strategy that's being proposed is to engage in the electoral process, to try and raise consciousness, to try and put forward demands, to try and put forward ideas, to try and demonstrate means of communicating, etc., to try and develop the kinds of movements that are necessary to make fundamental change in the society. Well, I agree with that strategy. So I can't debate that. But there does seem to be a difference, or I think there's a difference regarding something that, to my mind at least, is not in any way in contradiction with any of that. I want to see the society fundamentally change, top to bottom, economy, polity, kinship, race, everything. But the reality is that there's an election in November, and that I don't believe, I don't mean this in any way disparagingly, but I don't believe either of the two of you are going to be the next president of the United States. If you were, I would devote myself heart and soul to the effort to make that happen. But I don't believe that's going to happen. I still would support you in lots of places in the United States, probably about 40 states. But for me, in November, either Trump or Biden, assuming Biden is still running, either Trump or Biden is going to be elected president. And I believe there is a big difference. Not that Biden is a good guy, not that Biden is a friend of the working class, not that Biden is a anti-racist, not that Biden has any particular good qualities, right? For my opinion, Biden is a war criminal. Biden is racist, and so on. But there is still a gigantic gap, a really serious evilness gap, we might call it, between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And post-election, I believe that to pursue the programs that you each are putting forward and to have movements function in the scale and reach and consciousness that we all want, it will be much easier with Biden in place. And at the same time, I also think that there are some actual practical differences with Trump elected. Judges throughout the country are going to continue to be moved to the right. The climate, every climate agreement will be obliterated. The agreements that prevent nuclear escalation will be obliterated. The use of repressive force will be increased. Is Biden good on those issues? Is he going to go and by himself of his own accord, like you guys would? Is he going to do good things on those issues? No, I don't believe that for a minute. But will he be more susceptible to pressure from those kinds of social movements that you're calling for? If the only step that counts is ultimate victory, then, you know, to me, that's not real. People suffer now, and gains have to be made now. And I believe Biden will, because of his constituency, because of who would have elected him, because of a great many factors, be far more movable, be far more influenceable, not because we're going to appeal to his reason and not because we're going to appeal to his morality, but because the movement can raise social costs that he will recognize and relate to. Whereas Trump will just try to, I mean, the prospect of another 4 years of Donald Trump is so horrifying as to be unbelievable. And I want to relate one way in which that was conveyed to me. A friend, I mean, all three of us are old, but we have elders. So one of my elders, somebody who's just about 20 years older than me and who's been a friend for a long time, said to me that when he came into his early years, it was in a world that was seeing the rise of fascism. And that as a youth, he saw the rise of fascism. And he did not want to go out of this world seeing the same phenomenon again. And he was talking about the dynamics that are surrounding Donald Trump, not Joe Biden. This was Chomsky. And I found that sort of powerful coming from somebody like him. And his reasoning, I think, is really elementary. It's like mine. The idea that there is no lesser evil, that makes no sense. That can't be true. It can't be true that all the congressmen, all the senators, hell, everybody is equal on all axes. That makes no sense. So we know there are differences. When those differences are large enough, we have to pay attention to them. This time, they are large enough. And I say that as somebody who has never voted in a national election for a Democrat or Republican for president. Not once. And I'm 73. But this time, if Massachusetts was a contested state, what's called a battleground state, I would vote for Joe Biden. I'd be nauseous, but I would do it. I guess I should stop there. I think my time is running out.
Okay, let me continue this very valuable discussion. And perhaps we will sharpen some of the differences of opinion. Mike is 73. You're an old man.
I am.
I'm 80.
No.
I'm a real old man, and I've heard this argument before. I've heard it with Barry Goldwater being the monster right-winger who wanted nuclear war, with Ronald Reagan and all of the others. In fact, with regard to Noam Chomsky, who is I understand one of the signers of the open letter to Howie Hawkins on the safe state, and is a good friend, and I've collaborated with him and many others on social movements. He's been supporting the Democrats for one lifetime. He supported Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton and all of the others. There's always an argument that one candidate is worse than the other or lesser. I disagree with that thesis because it's not the candidate, it's the system. And both are adherents to a reactionary system. Trump is reactionary on immigration, but Obama deported more people, 2.5 million, than any president in the history of the United States. Obama organized, supported, and passed legislation for offshore drilling that gave the United States the largest fossil fuel capacity in the world at a time when the continued use of fossil fuel spells doom for humanity. Obama sent troops and special operations, death squad killers, drone wars, and sanction wars around the world. We have 1,100 military bases. Obama increased the military budget. The Democrats, just under Trump, added 10, 20, and 30 billion to Trump's demands for a $1 trillion budget. In other words, it's not the candidate. It's not whether or not Obama's a nice guy or appears with Pete Seeger on television for his inauguration. It's the system he represents. That system is fundamental. It cannot be reformed. I'm in this race because I'm a builder of these social movements. I was a leader in the Bay Area of the climate crisis. I'm the director of the Mobilization to Free Mumia. I'm on the administrative committee of the United National Anti-War Coalition. I helped initiate the Committee to Defend the Venezuelan Defenders. I was arrested 9 times in the civil rights movement. My record is in the streets, organizing the mass social protests, which are the only form. If I were to criticize Howie, it's not because I disagree with the demands, although one demand does stand out. It's because we're not an electoral party. We just use the electoral system when the attention of people is riveted on it. And today, by the way, practically nobody talks about the elections because the biggest questions in the lives of young people are up before their eyes, the very survival of the planet Earth. And no candidate from the capitalist parties even mentions it. The inherent racism in a system that still has hangovers from slavery and Jim Crow days. Those are the things that are radicalizing young people, and they're in the streets today, relatively unconcerned about the electoral process. The electoral process is rigged from start to end. Even if the Green Party is on the ballot in 50 states and DC, the real struggle is not in the electoral arena, is not with electing Greens to city council. In our experience, when Greens are elected in the Bay Area to the Oakland City Council or Petaluma or Santa Rosa, they vote with the Democrats, 100%. They are a party that seeks to reform capitalism. We are a party that seeks to abolish capitalism. And how do you do that? You can whistle in the streets saying capitalism must fall, but you have to be inspired when you see literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of young people saying it's a system. Police brutality is not the exception of bad cops, it's the rule. Layoffs of 40 million people is part of the system. When the bailouts came, the vast majority went to bail out the rich. They literally covered the GDP losses. It's the system, and it's going to be beaten by millions in the streets, only by a revised working class labor movement based on fighting democratic unions that are massive, that solidarize with all the struggles of the oppressed and take on the boss, not only in the streets, but the point of production and in the political arena. That's what the future holds for us. Working people, the oppressed nationalities have been holding back for a long time. I think that our time is coming. And with that, Michael, Howie, you're up again.
Okay, you know, I recognize there's always lesser and greater evils. I mean, if it was Mussolini versus Hitler, Mussolini would be the lesser evil, but that doesn't mean I support Mussolini. I think what the left needs to think about is a united front against both the lesser and greater evils, because that just enables the greater evil. That's been the dynamic since the New Deal Democrats became the New Democrats, the corporate Democrats back in the 70s. You know, the people that wanted realignment and send the Dixiecrats to the Republican Party, and then the Democrats will become a reformist party. Well, what happened was the left got taken for granted, and the Democrats moved to the right and started going more and more for corporate money than they ever had. We can't fight the right with the Democrats. The whole neoliberal economics and neoconservative foreign policy has been bipartisan. And the Democrats are more like pro-choice Republicans these days than a real alternative to the mainstream of the Republican Party. And for us in the Green Party, every state is a battleground. I was talking with Kali Akuno in Mississippi, and we're talking about this safe states thing. He says they want us to make some states sacrifice zones. You know, in Pennsylvania and Ohio, they're fracking the hell out of those states and building pipelines to take the gas to a big new petrochemical plastics complex in Appalachia. And the Democrats, even the elected officials that supported Bernie Sanders, won't touch that issue. Or take some battleground states in the upper Midwest, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. You got the Enbridge Line 5, which takes oil from the Bakken, the fracked oil fields in the Bakken field in North Dakota, and the Alberta tar sands to take it to be refined. And the Democrats don't want to fight that. It's the Green Party that's fighting that. Any city you go into, the Democrats are part of the real estate developer machine. If you're fighting for affordable housing, you're fighting the Democrats. And of course, everywhere, when you're fighting military bloat and wars and coups, you're fighting the Democrats as well as the Republicans. When Trump had Juan Guaido, the hand-picked new president of Venezuela, he got a standing ovation. And when I looked on the video, I couldn't see one Democrat who didn't also stand up and give him a standing ovation. So, you know, I just don't see how we can advance our goals of justice and peace and ecology, whether it's the Democrats or Republicans in there. That's not to say that Trump isn't worse than Biden, but for us on the left, if we don't vote for what we want and then vote for Biden, if you're a progressive or a socialist, you get lost in the sauce because Biden isn't for any of the things you're for. If you're a Bernie Sanders supporter, you were for Medicare for all, a full-strength Green New Deal, an economic bill of rights, college for all. Biden is not for those things. He said he'd veto a Medicare for all bill if it crossed his desk as president. He said it was irrelevant to the coronavirus crisis. The left disappears, it loses its voice, its identity as an alternative when we say we really want Biden to win instead of we want to get as many votes as we can. We don't have to win the election to advance our goals and move our agenda on things like Medicare for all and cutting back on the military budget and advancing an effective Green New Deal. And if we don't say we're for those things, they go off the agenda. And the agenda is Biden's agenda versus Trump's. And we're not going to surrender. We're gonna put our demands out there. And it's not just about educating and propaganda, it's about getting votes. So we have leverage. When I got 5% against Andrew Cuomo and he wanted to get ready to run for president, he got less votes than he thought he would get. He had to start competing for our votes. He couldn't take us for granted. So we got a ban on fracking, $15 minimum wage, and paid family leave in New York, things he had never supported before. So I think we can make more positive change by voting for what we want on the left instead of surrendering and settling for Biden.
There you go. First off, saying to vote for Biden in a contested state is not supporting Biden. I just said I thought he was a war criminal. If he manages to beat Trump, which I pray he does, then we've developed movements to oppose Biden and to try and win as much valuable change as we can. So, Howie, you're asking how can you possibly vote for Biden, or even tell others to vote for Biden, which is a bigger step, I suppose, and still be fighting for the things that we believe in? Well, here would be a way to do that, it seems to me. Either or both of you could campaign, and in 40 states, you campaign for your program, you campaign for to be heard, to raise the issues that you want to raise, to teach, to learn, to outreach. In 10 states, let's say it's 10 states that are battleground states, you go into the state and you do that for your party. You do that, Howie, for all the Green candidates in the state. You do that for the program, so that when you're talking in that state, you're talking for, let's say, the Green New Deal, or whatever it is that is on your agenda at that moment in time when you're talking in the state. But you say, this state is going to have a very close election. It's a battleground state. And in this state, the votes that are cast for me could have been cast for Biden. And that difference might, in our idiotic system that we have, lead to an election victory for Trump. It could. And so it seems to me, you could say, or I believe you could say, that as important as it is for me to get as many votes as I can, and I'm trying to do that in 40 states, in this state, because I believe in the program more than the candidate, because I believe in the struggle for change more than the number of votes that I get on one day in November, I'm going to suggest that you vote for Joe Biden. Why? Not because he's a good guy, he's not. Not because he's a friend of the people, he's not. Not because he's an ally of the working class, he's not. But because Donald Trump is a serious threat to virtually all of humanity in a way that, no, I'm sorry, Donald Goldwater wasn't, Reagan wasn't, although, yes, I would have urged people to not vote for Reagan in a contested state. The question, the tendency to explain how the Democrats are not our friends has really, I think, honestly, not much place in this debate, unless you're saying that you believe that the difference between Trump and Biden is relatively small. So for instance, Howie, the number of votes that you get in, let's say, Pennsylvania, or let's say that's a contested state when the time comes, that the number of votes you get in that state is more important to the development of the left than Biden winning the presidential election and having him in power and susceptible to our pressures as compared to Trump unleashing holy hell on the planet. I don't think it is more important. That doesn't mean I don't think that the change of the country is less important. And that doesn't mean that I support Joe Biden. I can't stand him. But it does mean that I think that certain things have large scale effects. And because of our crazy system, our electoral system and our electoral college system, a relatively small number of votes in a relatively few states may determine who the president of the United States is for the next 4 years. And if that choice was a small choice, okay, fine. But it's not. The difference between Donald Trump and Biden, the difference between Donald Trump and a lamppost, if a lamppost was running, is large, is huge. And I just don't understand how people can hear that and then attempt to portray it as supporting the Democrats. Jeff, when you said that Chomsky, or you could have said it about me, supported Hillary Clinton, or supported Bill Clinton, or supported any of those other people, that's nonsense. And you know it's nonsense. You know that Chomsky doesn't support them. I don't support them, right? And you know that we know that the system is the problem. So saying the system is the problem over and over again doesn't distinguish us. What distinguishes us is if you're willing to say, look, the difference between Trump and Biden is not all that great. It just doesn't matter all that much. My getting another 50,000 votes or whatever it is more important than Biden winning that swing state and then winning the election and the implications that has for people, for immigrants, for the poor, for blacks, for the whole rest of the world, and for the planet. If you want to say that, okay, then we have an honest disagreement. But saying over and over that the Democrats are horrible and saying over and over that the real problem is the system doesn't distinguish us. All of us say that, right? One of us is saying in this particular moment, in this particular election, there is a lot at stake. There is a tremendous amount at stake. And the choice to do something which might contribute to the victory of Trump over Biden is a mistake. Or not. That's our difference.
I think it goes beyond that, Mike. The tens and hundreds of thousands of young people on the street today are there because for the first time in their lives, they understand it's not just George Floyd.
It's not just what? I'm sorry.
It's not just George Floyd.
Oh.
It's the system. It's the system that is the modern day cousin of racism. Take Joe Biden, for example. He was Obama's running mate. He was put on the slate to capture the Southern racist, bigot, anti-busing vote. For decades, the Democrats had the line of running a Northern liberal and a Southern racist Democrat, an open segregationist. And when Nixon finally moved those slavocracy politicians, Klan members, white citizen councils, who were governors and senators over to the Republican Party, the Democrats had to find a way to defeat Nixon's strategy. And what they did was they started running the sons and daughters of the racist bigots in the South. They ran Al Gore, they ran Clinton, and they ran Jimmy Carter, all of whose parents and heritage was in segregation. Jimmy Carter went to a segregated church and bussed white kids past black schools so they could avoid integration. Al Gore's father was an open racist bigot, and Clinton from his state had the same reactionary background. The strategic idea of capitalist politics is to unite the Southern racist vote with the Northern liberal vote. That's why they want Joe Biden in there. They want a guy who can say, we're not going to change anything. We want Joe Biden in there to represent the South because we probably have the votes in the North. It's not Joe Biden. The explanation, the only explanation for all of the horrors that we see today, the climate crisis, the constant refining and production of fossil fuels when every scientist and sane person knows it spells doom for humankind. The sending people back to work in the middle at the high point of the COVID crisis in order to reverse the downward slide of capitalist profits is the bipartisan policy of Trump and the Democrats. They're all 50 states, regardless of whether the Democrats and Republicans want to send people back to work in the middle of this horror, implementing their version of herd immunity. It's in the New York Times, virtually front page. So it's the system, yes, I rant about. And the system can't be changed in the manner that you conceive. For example, you say that having a Democrat in power makes it easier to go into the streets. But the truth is, when the Democrats are in power, most of the reformist liberals are into the Democratic Party trying to reform it. Black Lives Matter became an adjunct of the Democratic Party. Its central leaders were funded by Democratic Party corporations, and they traveled the nation to vote Democrat. That was what happened. And when Trump was in power in the midterm elections in 2018, virtually the entire left mobilized not only against Trump, but to elect Democrats. Everybody from Bernie Sanders to AOC and the rest of them. They voted for every Democrat, regardless of whether or not they were Southern racist bigots, right-wing blue dog Democrats or not, because they wanted their capitalist party in power. Do you think the conditions of that all of these all of these people are mobilizing against are inherent in the system, and that system can only be changed by an organized, powerful, working class led. And I say working class because only the working class has the power to stop this system in its tracks. We've seen the youth put some big dents in it and inspire us all. And we will see in the future fighting working people, like in the 30s following the last Great Depression, demonstrating that real power is in breaking with the capitalist parties. Roosevelt's reforms were to save the country from socialism, not because a wing of the millionaire capitalist class, which he was a leader of, felt that they needed to introduce some palliatives. So I think we're headed into incredible times. On Howie, I heard you say you're for cutting 3/4 of the military budget. The remaining quarter, 250 billion, is probably more than every other nation on earth, if not combined. Why do we need any money for the military budget? Who is going to attack us? Why do we need to spend 1 cent on the military budget? And if we're going to fight for an eco-socialist future, doesn't that mean that we must nationalize and put under the control of working people the entire fossil fuel industry? Will they top it? That's the most profitable industry in the United States, next to the military, which has giant monopolies. The big three oil is not going to say we want to be good guys. The big three oil is the pusher of the major wars in the country. They're not going to be reformed. We have to understand that in order to save the environment, we have to abolish not only the military, which is the largest polluter, the Pentagon, institutional polluter, but we have to challenge the profit system itself, which is in bold relief in regard to the three oil corporations. So we'll go to Howie. Our chair is ready to go.
Okay, well, just to answer the questions about, our platform, 75% military spending cut is a tension reducing initiative. And then we negotiate toward complete and mutual nuclear disarmament, and beyond that toward further disarmament. It's a start, not a finish. And we do call for socializing the whole energy industry, the fossil fuel corporations, the Koch brothers, the utilities into a public energy system, democratically controlled from the bottom up. Green Party in its platform said we're ecological socialists back in 2016. And that's what my campaign represents. And I've won, I think it's 23 out of 25 Green primaries so far. So I think that's where the Green Party stands. But Michael, you make it like Biden's election depends on what I do. And, it's on him, not me. He's going to have billions of dollars. I have a few 100,000. And he's got a national stage. The media, Cuomo gets on there, but doing news conferences every day. I don't know why Biden can't do that and take on Trump. Instead, Chuck Todd asked him, do you think Trump has blood on his hands for how he's handled the coronavirus crisis? And Biden's answer was, oh, that's too harsh. That's demoralizing for people that want to fight Trump. And otherwise, Trump is toast between the total botch of responding to coronavirus and now the economic depression we're in. If Biden can't beat him and the Democrats can't beat him, they can't do anything. They don't need the Green Party. They need to get their own act together, get their own base out, spend their money smart, get out and say something so people feel motivated to vote for him. Not Trump is not enough. And it's not on me to help the Democrats do that. Another issue is, and this, everybody comes to me say, I'm a spoiler for Biden. No, the Democrats are the spoilers. Since Ralph Nader ran in 2000, we've been given a proven nonpartisan solution to this problem, which is a ranked choice national popular vote for president. And the Democrats haven't taken that up. They'd rather suppress the Green Party's right to be on a ballot. It's not just the Republicans that suppress voters. So, it's hard for Greens to even contemplate. And I think you need to understand how angry people are. Most Greens are really pissed off former Democrats because the Democrats were supporting the war in Iraq, or they on the wrong side of an affordable housing fight. Or when the police do something bad, the Democrats don't get the problem corrected in these cities. They're afraid of the police unions. So we end up fighting the Democrats. And there's, all these anxious people, angry people. We need to give them a positive alternative. It's just demoralizing the spirit and to say, especially for us who are saying we need system change, to say, but vote for Biden in these states, which, by the way, Biden considers 17 states battlegrounds, not just 10. So I'm supposed to stand down and, 35, 40% of the country. I wouldn't get the nomination of the Green Party if I did that. So we're up against not just the capitalist system, the two capitalist party system, which maintains the capitalist system. And we need to do something to fight for our future that is positive and points in another direction. To settle for the lesser evil is to tell people things can't change. I think that's the subtext of that message.
Well, we do disagree. We don't disagree about the need for revolutionary change. We don't disagree about the need for a fundamental change of the system. I believe in participatory socialism. We don't disagree about any of that. We also don't disagree that the mechanism for that is popular participation in mass movements and in the development of new grassroots efforts, struggles, and institutions eventually. We don't disagree about any of that, I don't think. But what we do disagree about is whether or not it is possible or even desirable or even essential to beat Trump. If we think that, then Howie, you said maybe that's not our job. I agree with you. It shouldn't be our job. I agree with you. I agree with you about the ills of the Democratic Party, and I am certainly angry. But let's say that they're as incompetent as you say they are, which I think they are. If so, it is very possible, distinctly possible, that come September, October, and November, the polls will show, not Biden, but the polls will show that there are a certain number of states that are going to be very, very close. Those become the contested states, however many it is. Hopefully it's none. Hopefully Biden is going to win every state in a walk, or every state that, a Democrat might conceivably win, and therefore win the election in a walk. Hopefully. But if it comes to September, October, and November, and let's say Pennsylvania is a contested state, and Howie Hawkins and Jeff Mackler go into Pennsylvania and campaign and say, voting for Biden is a vote for the past. Voting for Biden is a vote for the system. And I represent the future. I represent change. I challenge the system. And you get a lot of votes. Let's say you get enough votes so that the sum of those votes is enough to have put Biden over the top. Then if you had gone into those states and said instead, Biden is the past. Biden is a criminal. Biden is not our future. Our future is popular movements. Our future is, maybe a candidate sometime in the future, but not this election. They're not going to bring us into the future, but Trump is going to bring us into the sewer. Trump is a serious danger to civilization, and Biden is far less so. And so, while I'm for systematic change, system change, while I'm for the Green Party candidates up and down the ballot, while I'm for whatever else it might be, and while I'm for the Green New Deal, and while I think we need to vote for Biden in this contested state, hold our nose, vote for him in 10 minutes, for 10 minutes, and then when we leave that booth, forget that we voted for him and become his opponent if he becomes the president, and become his antagonist in the effort to win change. There is nothing about voting for Biden in a safe state which consigns us to supporting him thereafter. Nothing. It is perfectly possible to believe in fundamental change and to also believe that the difference between Biden and Trump is such that Trump's election would mean vastly more human sacrifice, vastly more human pain, vastly more suffering, and potentially via climate crisis and via nuclear war, as he removes all obstacles, really catastrophic results. Now, the counter position is that it's important for Greens to get votes everywhere, or it's important for Jeff Mackler to get votes everywhere. Well, it would be important unless the situation is such that those few extra votes that you get elect Trump. And that's what we ought to be arguing about, because that's our difference. You guys keep repeating things that aren't our difference. And they don't seem to be a very large difference between the two of you either.
All right. Well, we are coming up on 50 minutes now, so I think it's a good time to ask all the speakers for their final remarks. Thank you again for a great discussion this evening. And I think it would be great to hear from Howie Hawkins and Jeff Mackler on, what kind of strategy your campaign represents, and why you are running in this election, even if your campaign isn't going to win. Why that is politically important to you.
Nick, how about if we begin in reverse order the way we started? Everybody have 3 minutes, and then we can wrap it up with some commercial announcements by you. Is that reasonable?
Sure.
So who was the last speaker on the first round? Was that Mike?
Mm-hmm.
So Mike, Howie, myself, and then Nick, you wrap it up. Is that okay with everybody?
Sounds good. Does that work for you, Mike?
Sure.
All right.
Oh, I should start. I think this election is more important than any election in my lifetime. It's perhaps more important than any election we've seen. Not because the system isn't the ultimate cause and purveyor of the violence and the suffering that exists in our society. It is. The system is, not a candidate, not a president. But this time around, we have somebody and a party, a political party also, that has literally gone off the rails, that has attached itself to positions and to program and to agenda that is well beyond what the system requires, so to speak. The system is bad enough. Capitalism, racism, sexism, they're horrendous. But the manifestation of them that comes through Trump is worse still. And so for me, a strategy that makes sense in this election is to go into states and to try and advance political consciousness, to try and develop support for movements, to continue building for change, to try and develop organization that can continue to struggle for change. All those things are things that I think Jeff and Howie are involved in. Certainly Howie and the Green Party is. But to be aware that in our time and in our place, there is an incredible contest that may exist in the fall. I hope you're right, Howie, that it won't, because Trump will be destroyed in the course of the election and not have a chance. In which case, the safe state strategy says vote for these fellows or whoever you want, in wherever you want. But if it's close in states that matter in a contested election, then I think that it makes sense to vote to stop Trump, not to support Biden, but to stop Trump and to prevent him from getting a second term in which he will be totally unleashed, in which whatever crosses his mind will be what he attempts to do. And it appears that what crosses his mind is getting closer and closer to a fascist type of program. Is he an ideological fascist? I don't think so. I think he's an egomaniac who's concerned about his own self. But it happens to correspond very closely to a drift toward fascistic choices. And I think that is not something that one risks. Howie, you know well the precautionary principle, the green precautionary principle. There are times when you look around and you recognize an intense danger and you don't, an intensely abnormal and extremely advance danger and you don't provoke it, you don't bring it into existence, you don't risk its continued presence, you get rid of it. And then you move on immediately to the grassroots organizing and the consciousness raising and the development of a full vision of a new kind of society and fighting for it. Yes, you do all those things, but you do it in context, hopefully, of a Biden administration and not a Trump administration. And a Trump administration, I think some of us would find ourselves in jail. That would not be the worst part of the Trump administration. The worst part would be the possible dissolution of efforts to even talk about climate change, much less fully reverse it, and to even talk about limiting nuclear war possibilities, much less curtail and end them. So I do think stopping Trump is a part of an approach that tries to lead to a new and better world.
Well, I don't think, like I said earlier, you can fight the right with the Democrats. Trump has a rap sheet a mile long. They could have impeached him on all kinds of things, starting with the conviction that's hanging over him for that payment to those women that Michael Cohen went to jail for. You know, his racism is Al Green's first impeachment resolution, but only the Black, Latino, and Asian members of Congress would even sign on to that for a year. He's a failed businessman. He's self-enrichments, emoluments. I mean, they had so much. And Pelosi blocked them to protect the most conservative Democrats in Congress. So then you come to these contested states, the battleground states. Look, the Democrats are going to deliver the message. They already delivered it at me. I'm the spoiler. And it's going to get out there. And you and Noam Chomsky and Bill McKibben, a whole lot of other people are saying it. And all the left liberal publications like The Nation, the LA Progressive, it's hard for me to get a word in edgewise. It's not my job to campaign for Joe Biden. If he can't, beat this idiot Trump, it's not me, it's him. And, in the end, voters are going to make up their own mind. They'll make that calculation about, what's going on in their state. But it's not for me to tell them what the equation is. I think what I'm saying to socialists, progressives, ecologists, peace activists is that don't waste your vote. Don't let them take you for granted. Don't get lost in the sauce of the Democratic Party where it looks like you're supporting what Biden stands for. Make yourself heard, vote for what you want, and make the politicians come to you. And that'll give us a stronger foundation for fighting as we go forward, fighting for our future.
Well, I'd like to say thanks to Michael and Howie. It's been instructive. My campaign is aimed at building a revolutionary party. That's what we're all about. We use the opportunity when people have a heightened interest in electoral politics to get across their ideas and to explain that only working people and the youth and the oppressed have the power to change. Every significant victory for humanity in the United States has come from mass social movements, whether they be for the right of women to vote or for abortion, which is under attack by the Democrats, to the right to organize a union, to opposition to imperialist wars, all the other gains. None of them came from the legislation of the Democratic and Republican parties. They are the twin parties of capitalism. Today, we have the greatest opportunity in a lifetime, and I have a long life behind me, of winning young people to the revolutionary cause. That means a total break with any view that you can reform this sick beast that is capitalism, that threatens us with three simultaneous horrors. The moron Trump, as he was called by Rex Tillerson, his former Secretary of State, proposed 100-fold increase in tactical nuclear weapons, denies climate change, wants to send people back in the middle of a catastrophe that the world has never seen, a pandemic to be followed by others. And the resistance to all of the above by the Democratic Party has been zero, other than to score a few political points for the record. I agree that the Democratic Party cannot be reformed. The notion that there is a hair's difference, that we are voting between Hitler and Mussolini, is always the position of the lesser evil arguments. There will be no extra space if we elect the Democrats, but simply allowing the Democrats to say that they have the popular mandate, or the Republicans to continue doing what they always do. That's what AOC and the Bernie Sanders campaign did. Bernie ran twice and said, vote for the Democratic Party, and campaigned for the Democratic Party, and derailed many of the social movements, and led to the collapse of many leftists who joined him. We want young people today to be the central leaders of the only forces that are capable of fundamentally changing society and ushering in the socialist future. We want them to join socialist action, to be the best leaders of the anti-war movement, of the environment movement, climate crisis movement, and all the others who understand at the core of their being, that the system itself must be fundamentally changed, and it can only happen by the majority. It can only happen if we win the majority of the American working class, if we break with their capitalist politics and build our own parties, beginning with a working class labor party based on fighting reinvigorated unions. We will see this. And when working people come on the scene in all of their manifestations and colors, we'll see the kind of force that we're getting for the first time in our lives, a glimpse of in the streets today. All the repressive forces have not been able to quell this movement. 6 days in a row, they have shut cities down. As we speak, I just got a call from Alameda County saying that we have a curfew every day of the week. We have to be in our houses at 5 o'clock. In any case, thank you so much for participating in this debate. I'm sure we'll find ways to join together in the actions in the streets that come, to come in the streets in the days ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that great discussion to our speakers tonight. As I mentioned at the beginning of our webinar here, this is the first of our series of Monday night webinars from Socialist Action. That'll be on our YouTube channel and also aired on our website, socialistaction.org. Our next one is June 8th. Will be Socialist Perspectives on the COVID-19 Crisis. And we will have speakers from the US and internationally talking about the COVID-19 in Mexico, Brazil, Haiti, and speakers on the situation in the United States, both economically and as a health crisis. On June 15th, we will have a forum on US sanctions and the fight for non-intervention. While the US continues to sanction countries around the world during this global pandemic, preventing them from getting health care and needed medicines. Forums later this month on June 22nd, racism and COVID-19, and on June 29th will be our Socialist Action News Roundtable, where writers and contributors to Socialist Action newspaper will come on to talk about what they've been covering in the events and struggles here in the US and around the world. So thank you for being here with us tonight. Thank you again to our speakers, Michael Albert from Z Magazine and the host of RevolutionZ, Life After Capitalism podcast, Howie Hawkins, the Green Party's leading 2020 primary candidate for the US presidency, and Socialist Action's Jeff Mackler, our 2020 presidential candidate. Thank you to everybody who joined us, and we'll see you next Monday.
See y'all later.
All right, just ended